Again, we want to welcome you today to Signs of the Time. This is Reverend David Douglas. We're going to go ahead and get into our study today. We're coming again from the book of Daniel, and our thought for the day is entitled Antiochus IV, the Antichrist, and Armageddon. We're going to be starting to read from the book of Daniel, chapter 10 and verse 14, to kind of lay some groundwork, to lay a foundation for this study today. Daniel 10:14, the angel of God came and spoke to Daniel and said, "Now I am come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days. For yet the vision is for many days." Now, all of this that I believe that God has been showing Daniel from chapter 7, the vision that took place there, and then chapter 8, and on even into chapter 9 and 10, and now chapter 11, it is to show Daniel actually what is going to take place as far as in Israel and with God's people. Daniel chapter 12 and verse 4, the last chapter of this book, God was speaking to Daniel, said, "But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." I believe each one of these verses is actually telling Daniel about, like I said, what's going to befall or what's going to come to God's people as far as Israel. Things talking about, the vision is not yet for many days. And talking about the time of the end times. Not only what was going to take place, probably, right after Daniel died and things transpired. The visions that took place, the kingdoms that had rose up, after, the Babylonian captivity, and then there was the Persian kingdom, the Medo-Persian kingdom. Then there was the Grecian Empire, and after that, the Roman Empire. All this came to pass. But now we want to turn our attention, if we could, to Daniel chapter 11, and I'm going to begin reading at verse 21. Now, this whole chapter, probably from verse 5 all the way to verse 20, is talking about the king of the south and the king of the north. The battles that went on between these two dynasties, the Seleucid dynasty and the Ptolemy dynasty. The Ptolemy dynasty was mainly set up there in Egypt, and the Seleucid dynasty was set up in Syria. The Seleucid dynasty was actually larger. But here, from verse 15 down to around verse 20, is talking about the king of the north. But verse 21 says this, "And in his estate," otherwise in his place, "shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdoms by flatteries." This vile person is the first person that we want to talk about, and I believe that he is a foreshadow of the Antichrist. A lot of people, ask me, what is the Antichrist going to be like? I said, study up on this man called Antiochus IV Epiphanies. His brother, Seleucus IV, was on the throne, and he died. I believe he might have been even assassinated. Someone else sort of, assumed as far as the throne. And one of his heirs, his son Demetrius, was actually being held in Rome as a hostage. So, immediately, Antiochus IV he seized the throne. But the Bible said that to whom they would not give honor to the kingdom, he wasn't the next in line. Like I said, he had this one son named Demetrius, and I believe that there was another one that was an infant. And somewhere, even this infant died, and some would say that Antiochus had the child killed. I mean, he was very evil, and the Bible, like I said, called him this vile person. Daniel chapter 11, we're going to try to go verse by verse in this. It said, and with the arms of a flood, they shall be overthrown before him. They shall be broken. Yea, also the prince of the covenant. Otherwise, even those others, and there was even one that when his brother had died or been assassinated and killed, this other sort of, assumed the throne. Antiochus immediately, left Rome and came to none other than Syria. Syria was the northern kingdom. This is where Antiochus was actually born. Now, the capital of the northern kingdom during this time was actually located in Syria. It's a city called Antioch, and I believe today that it's located, the boundaries have changed. It's actually located in southern Turkey. But if you look at his name, Antiochus, and some says Antiochus, but I want to say Antiochus because of the capital city, Antioch. It was named after some of the other Antiochus. His father was Antiochus III, and there was even others, and I think it might have even been named after his grandfather or either great-grandfather, but that was the capital. So, he raised up, looks like even a small military. And he overthrew these people that was even seeking the throne, the one that was on there, but yet, the Bible said that he came in peaceably, that he even took the kingdoms by flatteries. Said that these people were going to be broken, otherwise he was going to defeat these others that was trying to take the throne. And he said also the prince of the covenant was broken. Otherwise, this prince of the covenant was actually the high priest in Jerusalem. And his name was Amias. He was suddenly removed by Antiochus IV Epiphanies. And this term and this title he gave himself, Epiphanies, actually means the illustrious one. He was suddenly removed and placed by another high priest named Jason. And he became like a puppet in the hands of Antiochus IV. Daniel chapter 11 verse 23 said, and after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up, shall become strong with a small people. It did not take many people for him to seize the throne, because nobody would actually, I reckon the term that we would use today, giving even the time of day. They did not want to recognize him, but yet he took the throne, he took the kingdom. And so by just this small group of people that kind of, made up their mind to side with him, he became strong enough, like I said, to take the kingdom. Verse 24 said, he shall enter peaceably. He's got a military, but yet he's going to enter peaceably, even upon the fattest places of the providence, the kingdom. The Bible said that he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his father's father. He shall scatter among them the prey and the spoil and the riches. Yea, he shall forecast his devices against the stronghold. After becoming king, he went into certain regions and certain lands and even, other provinces and countries. And these were rich countries, so to speak. It talked about the fattest places. And he conquered these regions. And he did something that his fathers and his fathers' fathers did not do. The spoils from the conquests, from the battles and wars, he would come back, go throughout his kingdom, sort of distribute it out amongst his subjects, his friends, and even he would, so to speak, pocket some of this stuff too, the wealth. This would kind of make him, look good, as a political leader, as a king, so to speak. Then it said that he shall forecast his devices against stronghold. He began to plan ahead and plot, make plans, how to overtake these fortified areas, expanding his kingdom even through military means. Verse 25 said, he shall stir up his power against the king of the south. Like I said, from verse 5 to verse 20, there had been constant wars with the king of the south and the king of the north, between Egypt and Syria. This went on almost like, here in America, probably for 100 years or so, there was a feud between the Hatfields and the McCoys. So this was actually, between these people, these things, the Bible said he stirred them up, kind of stirred the pot. His power and his courage, said, against the king of the south with a great army. Started out small, now he's become large. He's got a great army now, got great military strength. Said, and the king of the south stirred up really against him to battle. And he had Bible said, a very great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. Antiochus here declared war against Egypt. Antiochus and his army defeated this part of the Ptolemy dynasty. And Ptolemy, and I know he had another name at the end of it, he was taken hostage, held captive, and Antiochus declared himself king of Egypt. Verse 26 said, yea, they shall feed of the portions of his meat, and shall destroy many, and his army shall overflow. Many shall fall down slain. He continued his conquest in Egypt, possibly even other regions around there in northern Africa. Verse 27 says this, and both of these kings, he did not kill this Ptolemy. He kept him alive, but he held him as hostage. And he might have been even kind of free to kind of go around. Evidently said, verse 27 said, and both of these kings' hearts said shall be to do mischief. They shall speak lies at one table. Don't this sound like politicians today? Actually throughout the world. But it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. Antiochus and this Egyptian king named Ptolemy Philometor. Maybe I'm pronouncing that last title right, this last name. They kept meeting at this table and they kept spewing out lies to each other. But then in verse 28 said, then shall he, otherwise Antiochus, return into his land with great riches. This is the spoils of war. And his heart shall be stirred up against the holy covenant. He shall do exploits and return to his own land. After conquering Egypt, he would return into his capital in Syria, which was Antioch, with the spoils of war. Now, it had been rumored, and you could find this in history in some of the commentaries, it had been rumored that Antiochus fell in battle, that he had died in that war between Syria and Egypt. Antiochus got word about that because the Jews there in Israel, they were rejoicing. Because they knew what type of individual that this king of the north, Antiochus, was. They knew that he was corrupt. They knew that he was vile. So they were kind of rejoicing that they thought that he was dead, but he got word about it, so his heart was stirred up to set the Holy Covenant actually against God's holy people, the Jews. Verse 29 said, "And at a time appointed, he shall return and come towards the south, and it shall not be as the former or as the latter. Antiochus Epiphanes IV, he returned for a second invasion of Egypt, but it did not work out as other times." And we're going to see in verse 30 what happened. Said, "For the ships of Chittim shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the holy covenant. So he shall do as he even when he return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant." So, while trying to invade Egypt for the second time, Egypt had called out to Rome for help. So Rome came as far as with a little military strength, a little army, so to speak. But yet, Rome was powerful. And as Antiochus was approaching the shore, there on the beach, so to speak, there on the sands of those waters, a Roman general met Antiochus. And he demanded from him an answer. And he took a stick and drew a circle around Antiochus. And he said, "Before you step out of this circle, I need an answer. I need you to tell me if you're going to invade Egypt or not." Antiochus knew right then what that answer was. No, I'm not going to invade Egypt. So the Bible said he returned to his own land. And on the way, Israel. This is why God was telling Daniel about this. The kingdom of the north was right there in Syria, and the kingdom of Egypt down there, and Israel was in the middle of these conflicts. So Antiochus, on the way back, he was so grieved, he was so upset that he took it out on God's people, Israel. He was already mad at them for rejoicing and thought that he was dead. Word got back. So he took it out on God's people, Israel. So he took out his frustration, and they said that he even slaughtered and killed up to 80,000 Jews, sold I don't know how many thousand into slavery. He even told them they could not read the Torah or even obey the laws of the Torah. They could not do any religious rituals, such as circumcision. If he found a baby boy circumcised, he would kill that baby, take that baby and hang it around that mother's neck, parade her down through town, find a cliff, and throw her off. He was such a vile person. Verse 31 said, "In arms shall he stand up on his part. They shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, shall take away the daily sacrifice. They shall place the abomination that maketh desolate." So through his military strength, he went to the top of Mount Moriah where the holy temple of God was sitting. And this was the temple that Zerubbabel built. This was the second temple. He went in and stopped the daily sacrifices. Antiochus even offered up a pig on the altar. He took the blood and threw it all over the temple and into the Holy of Holies. And then Antiochus set up an idol the idol that was named Zeus, one of the Greek gods named Zeus. And he demanded the Jews to worship Zeus. So it goes on down to verse 32, and such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. This was saying that some of these Jews, he had turned them away from God. He had corrupted them by flatteries, like he took the kingdom of Syria. Now, he's promising them a lot of things if they would just turn away from God and worship Zeus, this Greek god. But there was a group in Israel named the Maccabees. They revolted against this. Now, you don't mess, with people's religion, with people's belief. So, this really stirred them up when they messed with the temple, when they made it desolate, when they polluted it, with the sacrificing of the pig and spreading the blood and all throughout the temple. And then they set up a god when they had been taught all their life, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and only him shalt thou serve. But the Maccabees, they revolted, and they defeated and pushed out Antiochus IV Epiphanies and his army. Now let's read on down in Daniel chapter 11, verses 33 through 35. Said, and they that understand among the people shall instruct many. They shall fall by the sword. See, there was a lot of people that died during this time. By flame and by captivity and by spoil many days. Verse 34. Now when they shall fall, they shall be hoping with little help. God's people not going to have much help. But many shall cleave to them with flattery. Some's going to turn away from God. Some's going to go the way of this northern army that this vile king called Antiochus was doing. Some still is going to go his way. Verse 35 said, and some of them of understanding shall fall and try them, and to be purged, and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. These three verses, I believe, is showing what was going to befall Israel from that moment on, even on down to these last days and even these end times. And many other things would happen to Israel because, they had sinned. They had kept going back, and even worshiping other gods. God was purging his people through all these things. Now, let's look at verse 36. Said, and the king shall do according to his will, shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. Now, verse 35, Daniel's vision kind of jumps through time. He's seeing into a different era, into a different age. I believe he is seeing the end time. This is not Antiochus. Antiochus, to go ahead and tell you, he died in Syria. Something took place. And I know the Bible even said that this vile king, and I think Daniel chapter 7, I used to think that was just talking about the future Antichrist. But Daniel chapter 7 was that little horn. But I seen something in this study. Sometime when you go back, you see things that you didn't see before. But the little horn in Daniel chapter 8 was actually Antiochus. That little horn came out of those four kingdoms, out of Egypt, Turkey, Syria, and Greece. He came out of Syria. That was the little horn in Daniel chapter 8. But yet he was a foreshadow of the Antichrist. Jesus talked about, as far as the Antichrist, or about the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, it wasn't about what Antiochus did. Now, Antiochus was a foreshadow of what the Antichrist in the end time, the Antichrist. I mean, Antiochus was evil, but folks, the Antichrist, Antiochus is going to be like a child compared, going to be like a Boy Scout compared to the Antichrist in the end time in the tribulation. So, but Daniel chapter 8 talks about that little horn, but in chapter 9 he talks about this treaty that the Antichrist will make with many and with God's people, and in the middle of the week he will break that treaty. Said it would be in the middle of the week, amen, which is actually talking about that 1 week, that treaty for 1 week is 7 years. In the middle of the week is 3.5 years. The Antichrist is going to break that covenant with many and even with God's people. And he shall set up the abomination of desolation in the temple. He's going to go in there according to Thessalonians. Paul said that he's going to go into the temple of God, set himself up as God to be worshiped as God. He's going to declare himself to be God. That's what Jesus was talking about. He wasn't talking about Antiochus. He said, when you see, they wasn't around there in Antiochus' day, but Jesus saw into the future. What Daniel saw was Daniel chapter 9. That's what Jesus was referring to. So, but he's going to magnify himself, and this is none other than the Antichrist. We had talked about Antiochus IV. Now we're going to talk about the Antichrist. So, you think about it, how precise these visions are, and how that they have come to pass. When you read Daniel chapter 11, and you look in history, folks, it is so precise, and he's dotted every I, and he's crossed every T. Everything fell into place just like God showed Daniel before time. So, Antiochus, Daniel saw this vile king 347 years, almost 350 years before he ever come to be the king of the north. So like I said, if you think about it, the king of the north, the king of the south, it is going back into, God seemed like through all of this is not breaking no cycle. It's the king of the north, which is Syria. The king of the south, which is Egypt. Syria, Egypt, all the way through. And I don't believe God is actually going to actually break this cycle, so to speak, showing us about the king of the north and the king of the south. So yes, Antiochus came from Syria, and I believe the Antichrist will come out of Syria some way. Now, like I said, I'm not saying, as I have said before when I have preached about this, I'm not saying that the present leader and even his family members are the Antichrist. I'm not saying that. And I kind of really don't believe, there's a lot of things that went on that, it's bad, the things that are taking place as far as in Syria. But for somewhere in the future, I believe that there's going to rise this man in power called the Antichrist. And I believe that he's going to be from Syria. He's going to be the king of the north as far as in the last days. But Paul talked about how this man, this Antichrist, was going to oppose. He's going to oppose and exalt himself above all that is called God, 2 Thessalonians 2:4. Or that is worship, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Now this Antichrist that keeps talking about him in verse 37, neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. Now some have said that he was going to be Jewish. I really do not believe this. The manner of the way that it's presented here, whatever it means, whatever God or gods that he is talking about, he's not going to regard any God. He said, nor even the desire of women. Now, when you look this up, the Bible said in Ezekiel chapter 8 and verse 14, I don't know if this is what it means, but it could refer to this, the desire of women, because he's talking about the worshiping of the God of his father, nor regarding any God. The desire of women is right in the middle of it. There is some deity about this desire of women. Now, some said that he's going to be a homosexual. I really, he could be, but I really don't believe that this is what it's talking about. But in Ezekiel 8:14 said, and he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which is towards the north. And behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. This is the god of fertility. It's a Mesopotamian god. And this worship came in to Israel. Now, some says that this desire of women was also talking about, a lot of the women in Israel had a desire to be the mother of the Messiah. So, take it and, interpret it, the way you see it. So, I mean, it could go both ways, but he's not going to desire any god or any other worship except that people would worship him. Said, but in his estate, Daniel 11:38, he shall regard the God of forces. One interpretation said fortresses. And a God whom his father knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and with precious stones and pleasant things. This God of forces, I believe, really means a God of war. Fortresses is like strongholds. And this God whom his father knew not, this God here could actually be Satan that has empowered him. Revelation in John talks about how that the Antichrist would be given his power by Satan. Verse 39 said, then shall he do in the most strongholds, and with a strange God. It keeps talking about this. I believe this could be, like I said, Satan, the devil, demons, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. Just like Antiochus Epiphanes, he's going to share the spoils and the riches from his conquering, the other kingdoms and territories. He's going to try to gain the people's trust. The world will follow after him, the Bible says. Verse 40, still the Antichrist, I believe, is still in the picture, but we're fixing to jump to something else. Daniel chapter 11 and verse 40 said, and at the time of the end, we're in the end time, I believe from verse 36, I believe it is, on, we're in the end time. We're in as far as the future events that are going to take place. Either, and I believe the rapture could take place almost at any time. And this man of sin the Antichrist will not be revealed. I know I told y'all as far as the country that I believe that he's coming out of. He will rise from power, I believe, out of the country of Assyria. The Bible even calls him the Assyrian. And the Assyrian kingdom was actually the southern part of Turkey, Syria, and the northern part of Iraq. Now that's getting into another message within itself. But at the time of the end, verse 40, shall the king of the south, which is Egypt, push at him. He's going to push at this Antichrist. He's going to be the king of the north as far as in the end time, in the last days, in the tribulation. I believe this is the tribulation period. Said, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, and chariots and horsemen, with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, shall overflow and pass over. I know it's talking about chariots and horsemen, but I believe that Daniel, when he was seeing this, did not understand as far as things like tanks and helicopters and planes and all this stuff. Said, and I know some people looking at this, that is the king of the south and the king of the north coming against the Antichrist. But I don't believe that that's really what it's meaning. When we see this, the king of the south shall push at him, at the Antichrist. Then it said, and the king of the north shall come against. When you look up this word against, it's in resistance. It's in defense of. So I believe right here some way that Egypt will have a war against Syria. This is going to be what I believe is going to be the start of the Battle of Armageddon. Armageddon, I don't believe probably is going to just take place as far as in one day. I believe it's going to be, when you look up the battle of the great day of God that we're going to talk about a little bit later, when you look up that term battle, it means war. And in wars, there are different battles, so I believe this is going to go on. But I believe what starts this, I believe what lights the fuse to all of this, to this stick of dynamite called the Battle of Armageddon, is that Egypt's going to rise up against actually the Antichrist. I don't know for what purpose. Something I believe is taking place as far as in Jerusalem. It could be, that is already, maybe allowing the Jews, to go in as far as, and set up as far as in their temple, as far as their worship. Then he goes in and sort of takes over. This might stir up something from Egypt and kind of rehash this feud between, these wars between Syria and Egypt. Like I said, God's not breaking a pattern here as far as in what he is showing Daniel. This is just going back into from Egypt to Syria. But yet, the king of the north is going to have mighty military power, like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen. He shall even enter into the countries, shall overflow and pass over. This is going to be a mighty, mighty military said. Verse 41, and he shall enter into the glorious land. That is Israel. See, Israel's right in the middle of this conflict. Where the Battle of Armageddon is going to be fought is actually in the plain of Megiddo, not too far. I believe probably maybe 20-something miles from Jerusalem. Said, but these shall escape out of his hand, verse 41, even Edom, Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. This is none other than the country of Jordan. He shall stretch forth his hand, verse 42, also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He's still, down there, plundering, and the battles and the wars are going on. Verse 43 said, but he shall have power over the treasures of the gold and silver, over all the precious things of Egypt. He's still down there conquering. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians, this is still, kind of in the northern part of Africa, shall be at his step. He's conquering them countries. They're going to come under his submission. So, I believe that verse 41 through 43 is where the Antichrist begins to rule and reign. And I believe that even at this time, the revised Roman Empire, has already had came in as far to the picture, and after that it came together, then the Antichrist rose up after that, and he began to rule with these 10 kingdom federations, which I believe are a lot of the nations that are around Israel. You said I thought the revised Roman Empire was going to come out of Europe. I don't believe that. The Roman Empire had 2 divisions. It had actually been separated. They had an eastern division, which was Europe. They had a western division, which was Europe. They had an eastern division, which is actually a lot of the Middle Eastern countries, like Syria, Iraq, Iran, over on in maybe to Afghanistan, those areas. Even down as far as into Egypt. It is actually, even when you look up even the map, even some of the Grecian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, these might as well say, the Muslim countries that are surrounding Israel. I believe that's where the 10 kings, the kingdoms, are going to come out of. Now, that's just my personal point of view. Some people kind of lean towards Europe, but I don't believe. I believe it's going to be from some of the countries, the Middle Eastern countries. And like I said, there's even a big possibility that even the Antichrist could be, from Islam, or he could be a Muslim. So, John on the Isle of Patmos, he saw this Antichrist. Like I said, Daniel is seeing all of this. He's seen Antiochus. I believe he is seeing, this one world ruler rise up. Antiochus was a type and shadow, and then he's seeing from verse 36 on, he is seeing the Antichrist. But John is seeing these things. John on the Isle of Patmos. Revelation 6:2, and I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and we went forth conquering and to conquer. Daniel was seeing that. How did he begin to conquer and overflow and overthrow these other countries, and even going into the land of Israel doing these things? But yet, while this Antichrist is down in Egypt, while this war is going on, verse 44 said, but tidings, news, came out of the east and out of the north. This is going to trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make waste, or otherwise wholly consume. Now I believe this is where the people are going to be. Like I said, I believe Armageddon is going to be a series of battles, but then there's going to be that last sort of battle that's going to be fought in the plain of Megiddo. Because Revelation that talks about, he's hearing this news coming from the east and from the north. And this has kind of troubled him. So he gets angry. He's with great fury. He rises up. He's going to meet what I say, these other armies that have been stirred up against him. See, everybody's not going to go along with the Antichrist kingdom. Other countries are going to actually come against him. But Revelation 16:12 said, and the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great Euphrates, which is the river, and it was dried up, that the way of the kings, plural, of the east might be prepared. In Revelation 9:13, I believe maybe it's even talking about these armies, these kings, not just one. And I know they said that China somewhere around the 1970 something had made a claim and kind of bragging that they could raise up a 200 million man army. But yet it's just not talking about one kingdom, it's talking about kings, plural. To make way, the river Euphrates that is in Iraq will dry up to make way for the kings of the east. Revelation 9:13 through 16, it talks about this 200 million man army. So you said, what about the north? It could be Russia, or it could be Turkey. Mainly what I say, even Russia. And they're coming down. These nations are going to be gathered together in that plain of Megiddo. Revelation 16:14 goes on to say, they shall go forth, these spirits, these demonic forces, are going to go forth to the kings of the earth. And even the whole world to gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. Verse 16, and he gathered them together into a place in a Hebrew tongue called Armageddon. So, I believe this is what Daniel is seeing when he's stirred up and he goes out, even to meet, and I believe he's going back into the land of Israel. That's where they all going to sort of intersect, and they're going to meet, and there's going to be that great battle. And you said, how do you know that it's going to be there? Verse 45 said this, and he shall plant the tabernacle of his palaces between the seas and the glorious mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Plant his tent, his tabernacle. He's going to kind of set up his headquarters. I believe he's actually going to be kind of ruling the known world, or ruling the world actually from Jerusalem. And even upon, because it said here between the seas, that between the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea, you'll see Jerusalem. And it said, in the glorious mountain, which is none other than Mount Moriah, where I believe that the third temple will be rebuilt. He will be sitting in there kind of like on a throne, declaring himself to be God, and he's ruling But yet the Bible said there, he's going to come to his end and none shall help him. Like I said, this is not Antiochus. Some people says that it is. Some commentaries says that it is. But Antiochus, according to history, died in, I believe it was Iraq or Iran. But yet, the Antichrist, how will he die? Not by human hands. But yet, Revelation 19, verses 11 and 21 says this. Even in verse number 19, let's go there real quick. Revelation chapter 19. There's some scriptures there I don't want to overlook. Jesus is going to be coming back. The heavens are going to be open. He's going to be coming back on a white horse. Now, the white horse in Revelation chapter 6, the opening of the first seal, that's the Antichrist. He's got a bow, don't show no arrow. He's got a crown, which means that he's conquering. But this, Jesus, is coming back on a white horse. They're going to call him faithful and true. His eyes are going to be like a flame of fire. And on his head is going to be many crowns. And had a name written which no man knew, had his vesture dipped in blood. Now I know it talks about, as far as the battle of the Armageddon, the blood's going to flow for over 200 miles up to the horse's bridle. So is this where that his vesture gets dipped in blood? Because it even talks about him treading out the winepress of the wrath of God, which is none other than this great battle called Armageddon. So, but Revelation 19 verse 19 said, And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war. See, they're coming against him, but now the tide has changed. The Antichrist don't like Jesus Christ. He's the opposite. But he's coming back. And a lot of these other kings, probably the kings of the east, a lot of them, don't like, as far as this Messiah, this king that is coming called Jesus. So they're going to, amen, they've been fighting one another, but now they're going to turn and begin to try to fight the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, who is coming with the armies of heaven. But you know what? The Bible said in the end, according to Daniel, said that yet he shall come to his end and none shall help him. Paul said this, that Christ is going to be destroyed, the Antichrist is going to be destroyed by the word of the Lord's mouth and at the brightness of his coming. So the Bible said this, that there's going to be a sword proceeding out of his mouth. That's his word. All they're going to have to do is just speak a word, or either, as some say, it said, by the breath of his mouth. He's just going to look at the Antichrist, amen, and the false prophet, and they're going to be defeated. That whole army is going to be slain there that day. And the Bible said this in verse 20, said, And the beast that was taken, and the beast was taken, otherwise the Antichrist, and the false prophet that wrought these miracles that caused the world to worship the Antichrist and to bring about the mark of the beast system. They both were cast alive into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone. Now I know some says that the battle of Gog and Magog is the battle of Armageddon. And I'm still studying on this, and I just cannot see the battle of Gog and Magog and the battle of Armageddon. They seem similar, but Gog, who was the leader of that battle, the battle of what we call Gog and or either of Magog, the Bible said he was buried. Now, it don't say the Antichrist was buried. It said he was cast alive along with the false prophet. Both of them were cast alive. I don't know, like I said, it possibly could be that the earth's going to open up and swallow them up. They're going to be cast alive into the lake of fire. Nobody's going to get a chance to bury them. So, at the end of this battle, and after the Antichrist and even the false prophet is destroyed, the remnant is going to be slain with the sword before him that sat on that white horse, which the sword proceeded out of his mouth, and then all the fowls of the air were filled with their flesh. Revelation 14 and 20 said, in that winepress that I talked about earlier, thinking about that vesture dipped in blood, said, in that winepress was trodden without the city. See, the plain of Megiddo is possibly approximately 20-something miles outside of Jerusalem. It is a vast kind of like valley. I know there's been other battles fought there. Napoleon even talked about, that area, the plain of Megiddo. And the blood came out of the winepress even to the horse's bridle about the space of 1,600 furlongs. That was 200 miles that the blood flowed up to the horse's bridle. So, Daniel saw all of this. He saw Antiochus, like I said, 347 years before he came to power. He saw all the battles between the king of the north, king of the south. He saw as far as even Alexander the Great and how he conquered and how that kingdom went as far as his 4 generals. I mean, everything was so precise. He saw the kingdoms that they were going to rise up after Babylon as far as those beasts that rose up as far as in Daniel chapter 7. We're going to try to do even a study on that, even to show you what John was seeing in Revelation chapter 13. So I hope this study today has helped you to cause you to get in God's Word, get in the book of Daniel, study it, read and study even the book of Revelation, because the Bible said, blessed is he that readeth the words of this prophecy and keeps those things that are written therein. You're blessed even when you study Bible prophecy. So if you would, do me a favor, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please, even get word out. When we share this on Facebook, please share this with others. Please subscribe, like I said, to our YouTube channel. Share this, and I know that the Lord will bless you. We're living in the last days. We're living in the end time. We're living in the generation that Jesus, I believe, will come back real soon. He said, if I go away, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Christ wants to offer to bear the sins of many, but to them that look for him, I'm looking for him, folks. I know I talked about as far as the Antichrist, but I'm not really looking for the Antichrist. I'm looking for Jesus Christ. I'm not looking for the rise of the Antichrist, I'm looking for the coming of the Lord, of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Looking unto Jesus, who is the author and the finisher of our faith. But seeing all these things, folks, and see how the world is kind of shaping up, God's calendar of events are falling into place. And as I've always have left you as far as with some of these studies, reminding you what Jesus said, when you see these things come to pass, lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh.